The Pat Kenny Show
with Aviva Insurance
on Newstalk.
Potential friction in the coalition has arisen in the form of a Fine Gael call for a €1,000 tax cut in the budget, which has been branded by some in Fianna Fáil as pre-budget kite flying. It was suggested in an article authored by 3 Fine Gael junior ministers. Amid projections of record budget surpluses over the next 4 years, they are proposing considerably larger tax cuts. Fianna Fáil Finance Minister Michael McGrath is non-committal.
And I will bring forward the summer economic statement in July that will lay out the budgetary parameters, and then as we move towards the budget in the autumn, we will assess what the position is in relation to inflation, what way incomes have moved and what additional support may need to be provided.
Well, I'm joined now by one of the authors of that article, Minister of State for Financial Services, Credit Unions and Insurance, Fine Gael TD for Dún Laoghaire, Jennifer Carroll McNeill. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning.
You have been accused by Fianna Fáil of jumping the gun on tax promises in advance of the budget.
Well, tax is set out in the programme for government and is a pretty consistent position of Fine Gael. I think at the moment, we're in a really strong position where we're looking at potential surpluses into the future and reflecting on how best to use that. And we published a piece, myself and my colleagues Martin Hayden and Peter Burke, reflecting on where Ireland is economically, the fact that we have those surpluses and how we're going to invest them and, the best structure in relation to that. And the Department of Finance is having a consultation period in relation to that. But we've also sort of set out very clearly the Fine Gael view in relation to the need for further tax cuts, building on last year's budget. That's completely consistent with the programme for government. That's what Fine Gael went into this government and negotiation process talking about and have consistently talked about, Leo Varadkar and all of my party colleagues. So it's that we are at a really strong position economically, one that I don't think we ever thought we'd be at 10 years ago when the IMF were here.
And all of that is fair enough, and the surpluses will be pretty enormous, it would appear, if they continue into the medium-term future. However, it's been one of the mantras of Paschal Donohoe particularly to say that you don't incur ongoing expenses out of income that may be temporary.
And that is why in the budget last year you saw a series of measures that were both social welfare increases, tax cuts and once-off measures such as the cost of living supports, the direct transfers that were once-off, like child benefit being doubled or the pension being doubled. And there was a mix there. And it's very clear that we have the opportunity now to address some of our national debt, to put aside money in a fund, the terms of which have yet to be decided, but I think it's important that we think about that and how we might get an annual return from such a fund, and also make a difference to the cost of living pressures that people are having. And the single best way of doing that for working people is through tax changes. We have the most progressive, i.e. you get to the higher rate of tax really, really soon in Ireland relative to other European countries. And we've always taken the view that has persistently been too high.
If you want to stick with the promises, Jennifer, of programmes for government and election campaigns, you would have abolished the USC. That was one of your promises.
The tax changes need to come down, and whether that's USC, whether that's widening the bands, whether that's rate reductions, what I'm concerned about is people having more money in their pocket, and there's lots of different ways of achieving that. The USC has a benefit in the sense that everybody pays it, albeit at very low rates for people on very low incomes, but there's a real pressure comparatively about how quickly people get to the top rate of tax. And that is something that Leo Varadkar has said consistently he would like to try to address. That was very clear in the programme for government. We began that process last year in the budget. We've consistently said, both at the last budget and since then, that we want to continue that process. And, there's a lot of focus here on tax, and I understand that because it's very, very important to people. But the Fine Gael position more broadly in the article that myself and my colleagues wrote was a reflection piece on what now to do at a moment of very strong economic moment where you have 3.9% unemployment and you have projected budget surpluses of potentially 65 billion over the next 3 years. These were unheard of concepts 10 years ago with 16% unemployment and the IMF here. And I think it's important that every political party, that everyone has an opportunity to reflect on how best to think about that over in the years to come. I mean, this is a really positive moment, Pat, to be in that situation.
Indeed,
and
but
it has
the
been
problem problem
Gael
is
government that has brought us
you
to
are
that.
in government with two partners, the Green Party and Fianna Fáil, and they are miffed because this looks like a populist move on your part. If there is to be a tax credit, an income tax credit that will put €1,000 more into people's pockets, at a cost, by the way, of 1.5 billion, I read in one of this morning's papers, Fine Gael wants to get the credit. So even though the Minister for Finance is from Fianna Fáil, Michael McGrath, who by the way is quite a circumspect man, and he just said this is a very unusual way to do
last
business.
Last year's budget package on the tax side was 1.2 billion. So it's building on that again, as we set out in the programme for government, as is agreed in the programme for government in relation to the tax approach. And each party comes to government formation with their own key objectives. Fine Gael has a very strong focus on reducing income tax for workers. The Green Party a very strong focus in relation to carbon tax and other things. And everybody is entitled to set out their views. And, there are political parties can do that in different ways, whether they do that in parliamentary party meetings and they end up getting leaked in inaccurate ways. And, I see that from parliamentary party meetings across the board. There's, myself and my colleagues have a view about the future of Ireland, a vision for Ireland. And, we're entitled to set that out in different ways and in, constructive ways like that and setting out at this important economic moment our reflections in Fine Gael about the vision for the country. And that is long-term prudent management of the public finances, as we have done to date, which is, what has gotten us here. And making sure that work really pays and that people are getting more money back. And I think
so
there's different ways of doing that.
You deny that it's pure populism?
Well, I think if you read the article, it talks about putting an awful lot of money away for the future. And it talks about how best to get a return for people on an annual basis, if possible, how to deal with our national debt. Dealing with the national debt is not exactly top-class populism, Pat, it really isn't. But making sure that we have a balanced approach to the budget, including money getting back into people's pockets through tax changes, working people who are working really hard and paying more tax in Ireland than anywhere else across Europe on a comparative basis. I think that's a pretty reasonable approach to the world.
Jennifer, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jennifer McNeill, who's Minister of State for Financial Services, Credit Unions and Insurance, and Fine Gael TD for Dunleary. Hugh O'Connell